The stagecoach rumbled to a halt in front of Willow Creek's only hotel, kicking up dust that swirled in the late afternoon sunlight as Clara Matthews clutched her small valise with trembling hands. After 3 weeks of travel from Boston, she had finally arrived at her destination and her future in the Montana Territory of 1875. The journey west had been long and uncomfortable, but it paled in comparison to the anxiety that now filled her chest as she prepared to meet the man who had agreed to marry her sight unseen. Clara smoothed down her travel-worn dress and touched the scar that ran from her left temple down to her jawline, a permanent reminder of the fire that had claimed her parents' lives when she was 16. The same fire that had marked her face and left her with few prospects back east. At 22, becoming a mail-order bride had seemed her only option for a life beyond spinsterhood and poverty. Last stop, Willow Creek, the stagecoach driver called out as he opened the door. Clara stepped down carefully, scanning the dusty main street for the man who was to be her husband. According to their correspondence, Harold Bentley, a successful store owner, would be waiting for her arrival. She spotted a well-dressed man in a tailored suit standing rigidly at the edge of the boardwalk, his expression tightening as his eyes found her. "Miss Matthews?" he asked, his voice clipped and formal. Clara nodded, forcing a smile. "Mr. Bentley? It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Harold Bentley did not return her smile. His gaze fixed on her scar, then quickly darted away. Yes. Well, you must be tired from your journey. Please follow me." He did not offer to carry her bag as they walked in uncomfortable silence to a store. The two-story building stood prominent on the main street, with Bentley's General Merchandise painted in bold letters across the front. Inside, a young clerk was helping a customer. Harold led Clara to a back office and closed the door behind them. "Miss Matthews," he began, not meeting her eyes, "I find myself in an awkward position. Your letters were well written and gave me the impression of an educated, sensible woman. You mentioned your accident, but I'm afraid I didn't anticipate." Clara's heart sank. "The extent of my scarring," she finished for him. "Yes." He cleared his throat. "I have a certain position to maintain in this town. As the owner of the most prosperous business, appearances are important." "I understand," Clara said quietly, though her chest tightened painfully. "I've taken the liberty of purchasing a ticket for tomorrow's eastbound stage," Harold continued, placing a slip of paper on the desk between them. "I'll cover your accommodations at the hotel for tonight." Clara stared at the ticket, humiliation burning her cheeks. "I see. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but surely you understand my position." Before Clara could respond, the office door swung open and a tall man in worn ranch clothes entered without knocking. His brown Stetson was pushed back on his head, revealing sandy blonde hair and sun-weathered skin. He carried a list in his hand and stopped short at the sight of Clara. "Pardon the interruption, Bentley. Didn't know you had company." His voice was deep and carried the drawl of the West. Harold stood straighter. "Young, this is hardly the time. I'm in the middle of private business." The newcomer's eyes, a striking blue that reminded Clara of summer skies back home, lingered on her face for a moment, then moved to the ticket on the desk. Something in his expression shifted. "Miss," he acknowledged with a slight tip of his hat. "Yates Young. I run the Double Y Ranch outside of town." "Clara Matthews," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Yates's gaze returned to Harold, a hardness settling in his features. "Sending someone away, Bentley? That doesn't seem hospitable." Harold's face flushed. "This is none of your concern, Young. Miss Matthews and I had an arrangement that I'm afraid cannot proceed as planned." Understanding dawned in Yates's eyes as they moved between Clara's scarred face and Harold's uncomfortable expression. "I see," Yates said slowly. "Well, I reckon I'll come back another time for my supplies." He tipped his hat again to Clara and left, closing the door behind him. Harold cleared his throat. As I was saying, the stage leaves at 10 tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a room at the hotel tonight. Clara stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Bentley. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Clara walked toward the hotel, tears threatening to spill. 3 years of saving every penny, weeks of travel, and all her hopes for a new beginning gone in a matter of minutes because of the scar she bore. The hotel was a simple 2-story building with a wide porch. Clara had just reached the steps when she heard boots on the boardwalk behind her. Miss Matthews? She turned to find Yates Young approaching, his long strides eating up the distance between them. Mr. Young. She quickly wiped at her eyes, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. I don't mean to pry into your business, he said, but I couldn't help noticing Bentley had purchased you a ticket back east. Clara's chin lifted slightly. Yes. Our arrangement has been dissolved. Yates's jaw tightened. Because of your scar? The directness of his question startled her. Most people pretended not to notice, their eyes darting away whenever they came close to looking at the puckered skin. Yes, she admitted. Mr. Bentley feels I would not be suitable as a merchant's wife. Yates cursed under his breath, then immediately apologized. Pardon my language, madam. Bentley's always been more concerned with appearances than substance. Clara managed a small smile. It's all right. I should have been more forthcoming in my letters. No, Yates said firmly. A man worth his salt would see beyond such things. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Yates spoke again. Miss Matthews, I don't mean to be forward, but I have a proposition for you. Clara tensed. She'd heard stories of vulnerable women being taken advantage of in frontier towns. Seeing her expression, Yates quickly added, Nothing improper, I assure you. My ranch is prospering, but my house lacks a woman's touch, and I could use help managing the accounts and correspondence. I'm offering you a position as housekeeper and bookkeeper at the Double Y. A position? Clara repeated, confused. Not marriage? Yates's tanned face colored slightly. No, madam. Just honest work with fair pay. A room of your own in my house, meals provided, and $2 a week. More if you prove as educated as Bentley suggested. Clara considered his offer. Going back east meant returning to poverty and ridicule. At least here, she would have employment and a fresh start of sorts. Why would you help me? She asked. Yates looked at her directly, his gaze never wavering from her eyes. Because I know what it's like to be judged unfairly. And because when I look at you, Miss Matthews, I see determination in your eyes, not just a scar on your face. For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, Clara felt a small spark of hope. I accept your offer, Mr. Young. Thank you. Good, he said with a nod. I'll refund Bentley for your ticket. We'll leave for the ranch first thing tomorrow. The next morning, Clara waited on the hotel porch with her valise, watching as Yates approached in a wagon. He wore the same worn clothes as yesterday, but there was something undeniably handsome about his tall, lean frame and the confident way he handled the horses. Morning, Miss Matthews, he called, pulling the wagon to a stop. Ready to see your new home? Clara nodded, allowing him to help her onto the seat beside him. As they pulled away from Willow Creek, she couldn't help feeling as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Harold Bentley's rejection still stung, but the promise of a new beginning eased the pain. The Double Y is about an hour's ride, Yates explained as they traveled. It's not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's growing. Started with just 50 head of cattle 5 years ago. Now I'm running close to 500. That's impressive, Clara said sincerely. Have you always been a rancher? A shadow crossed his face. No. I came west after the war. Needed open spaces after 4 years of fighting. Clara nodded, understanding his need to escape painful memories. I lost my parents in a fire when I was 16, she offered. That's how I got this. She gestured to her scar. I've been working as a seamstress in Boston since then, but people can be cruel about things that make us different. Yates finished for her. Yes, she said softly. When I saw the advertisement for mail-order brides, it seemed like a chance to start over somewhere people didn't know me. Somewhere the scar wouldn't be the first thing people saw. Yates's hands tightened on the reins. Bentley's a fool, he said simply. They continued in comfortable silence until the land opened up to reveal a valley with a creek running through it. Cattle dotted the grassland, and nestled against a backdrop of pine trees stood a sturdy log house with a wide porch and smoke curling from its chimney. Welcome to the Double Y, Yates said, a note of pride in his voice. The house was larger than Clara had expected, 2 stories with glass windows and a stone chimney. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and a corral held several horses that watched their approach with interest. As they pulled up to the house, the front door opened and an older woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Hawkins, Yates called in greeting. This is Miss Matthews. She'll be taking over the housekeeping and books. Mrs. Hawkins was a stout woman with gray streaked hair and kind eyes that assessed Clara without lingering on her scar. Pleased to meet you, Miss Matthews. I've been helping Mr. Young since his place got too big for a bachelor to manage, but these old bones will be glad for the relief. My husband and I have our own small homestead to tend to. It's nice to meet you, Clara replied, already warming to the woman's straightforward manner. Mrs. Hawkins showed Clara to her room, a comfortable space with a real bed, a small writing desk, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was more than she had expected, and certainly more than she'd had in her tiny rented room in Boston. Mr. Young had me air it out and put fresh linens on the bed, Mrs. Hawkins explained. Bathroom's down the hall. He put in one of those fancy boilers so you can have hot water without heating it on the stove. Man's progressive that way. After Mrs. Hawkins left to prepare lunch, Clara unpacked her meager belongings, arranging her few books on the small shelf above the desk. She changed from her travel clothes into a simple blue work dress and pinned her light brown hair into a neat bun before going downstairs. She found Yates in what appeared to be a study, bent over a ledger with a furrowed brow. Mr. Young, she said from the doorway. Mrs. Hawkins showed me my room. It's lovely, thank you. He looked up, and for a moment, he simply stared at her. Clara resisted the urge to turn her scarred side away from his gaze. Glad you like it, he finally said, clearing his throat. And please call me Yates. Mr. Young makes me feel like my father. Clara smiled. Then you must call me Clara. Clara, he repeated, as if testing the name. Well, Clara, would you like to see what you've gotten yourself into? He gestured to the ledger. My attempts at bookkeeping leave something to be desired. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into life at the Double Y. She organized Yates's chaotic accounts, established a proper filing system for correspondence, and brought order to the household management. Mrs. Hawkins came 3 times a week to help with the heavier cleaning and to teach Clara to cook Western-style meals, but otherwise, Clara managed on her own. Yates was often out from dawn until dusk, working with his ranch hands to maintain the property and care for the cattle. But in the evenings, they would share meals and conversations that gradually grew more comfortable and wide-ranging. Clara found him to be well-read despite his frontier life, with thoughtful opinions on everything from politics to literature. On a particularly hot July evening, Clara was sitting on the porch shelling peas when Yates returned from the range. He removed his hat as he approached, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Evening, Clara, he said, settling into the chair beside her. Productive day? Very, she replied. I finished organizing your tax records. You've been overpaying for years, by the way. He chuckled. That's why I hired you. Clara glanced at him. You look tired. Just hot, he said. One of the streams is drying up. Had to move the north herd to better water. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, The only sounds the soft clicking of peas falling into the bowl and the distant lowing of cattle. "Would you like some lemonade?" Clara asked. "I made some this morning." "That sounds perfect." When she returned with 2 glasses, Yates had removed his work gloves and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms tanned dark by the sun. Clara tried not to stare as she handed him his drink. "Thank you," he said, taking a long sip. "That hits the spot." Clara resumed her task, aware of his eyes on her. After a moment, he spoke again. "You know, in the weeks you've been here, I don't think I've ever seen you with your hair down." Clara's hands stilled. I keep it up. It's more practical." "Of course," he said, seeming to sense her discomfort. "I didn't mean to pry." Clara hesitated, then decided to share the truth. "The fire that scarred my face also burned some of my hair on this side." She touched the left side of her head. "It grows unevenly now. Keeping it pinned up hides that." Yates nodded, his expression soft with understanding. "War leaves similar marks. Some you can see, some you can't." "Yes," Clara agreed, feeling a connection in their shared understanding of living with scars, both visible and hidden. The next day, Clara was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the sound of raised voices drew her to the window. Yates stood in the yard, confronting a man Clara recognized as Ted Wilson, one of the ranch hands. "I won't tolerate that kind of talk on my ranch," Yates was saying, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It was just a joke, boss," Wilson protested. "There was nothing funny about it. Pack your things and collect your pay. You're done here." Wilson's face darkened. "Because of that scarred woman? Sheer woman now? Didn't figure you for someone who'd settle for damaged goods." Before the words were fully out of his mouth, Yates's fist connected with Wilson's jaw, sending the man stumbling backward. "Get off my land," Yates said, his voice dangerously quiet. Clara stepped back from the window, her heart racing. Had Wilson been talking about her? She returned to the stove, trying to focus on the meal she was preparing, but her hands shook slightly. When Yates entered the kitchen some time later, his knuckles were raw and a muscle worked in his jaw. "Everything all right?" Clara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Fine," he said shortly. "Wilson won't be working here anymore." Clara nodded, not pressing for details. "Dinner's almost ready." That evening, the meal was unusually quiet. Clara could feel tension radiating from Yates, but she didn't know how to address it. Finally, as she cleared the plates, she gathered her courage. "I heard what Wilson said," she admitted, "about me being damaged goods." Yates's head snapped up, his eyes fierce. "That man is ignorant and cruel. I won't have anyone on my ranch who speaks that way about you, or anyone else." "Thank you for defending me," Clara said softly. "But you didn't have to fire him on my account." "I didn't fire him on your account," Yates corrected her. "I fired him because a man who judges others by their scars instead of their character has no place here." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Still, I appreciate it." Later that night, unable to sleep, Clara stood by her window looking out at the moonlit valley. The sound of a soft knock at her door startled her. "Clara?" Yates's voice came through the wood. "Are you awake?" She opened the door to find him standing there, still fully dressed. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said. "I saw your light, and I wanted to make sure you were all right." "What Wilson said, it's nothing I haven't heard before," she assured him. "That doesn't make it right." His eyes were intense in the lamplight. "Clara, I hope you know that's not how I see you. Not how anyone who matters sees you." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Yates." After a moment of silence, he nodded. "Well, good night then." "Good night," she replied, watching as he turned and walked down the hallway. As summer turned to fall, life on the ranch grew busier. Yates was preparing for the autumn cattle drive to the railroad at Miles City, and Clara found herself taking on more responsibilities as he focused on the herd. One evening in late September, Yates called Clara into his study. A map was spread across his desk, and he was marking a route with a pencil. "I'll be leaving for the cattle drive in 3 days," he informed her. "I'll be gone for at least 2 weeks, possibly 3 depending on the weather and how the herd moves." Clara nodded, feeling a surprising pang at the thought of his absence. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly here while you're gone." "I know you will." He hesitated. "I've been meaning to talk to you about your position here." Clara tensed. Had she done something wrong? Was he planning to let her go? "You've been here for 3 months now," Yates continued. "You've more than proven your worth. I'd like to increase your wages to $3 a week." Relief washed over her. "That's very generous, thank you." "It's what you've earned," he said simply. Then, more hesitantly, "I've also been thinking about your future." "My future?" Yates looked slightly uncomfortable. "Your arrangement with Bentley fell through, but that doesn't mean you couldn't find. I mean, there are plenty of respectable men in the territory who would be lucky to have a woman like you as a wife." Clara felt a strange disappointment at his words. "Are you trying to marry me off, Mr. Young?" "No," he said quickly. I don't want you to feel that working as my housekeeper is your only option. You deserve more than that." "I'm quite content with my position here," Clara said carefully. "Unless you're eager to be rid of me?" "No," Yates said, his voice dropping lower. "That's the last thing I want." Their eyes met across the desk, and something unspoken passed between them. Clara felt her pulse quicken as Yates stood and moved around the desk to stand closer to her. "Clara," he began, but was interrupted by a knock at the front door. The moment broken, Yates stepped back. "That'll be Foreman Jenkins with a final count for the drive." The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as the ranch prepared for the cattle drive. The night before Yates was to leave, Clara prepared his favorite meal, beef stew with dumplings, and even baked an apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Yates outlined the ranch operations that would need attention in his absence. Jenkins would manage the remaining hands, but Clara would need to handle payroll and any business correspondence. "I've left signed bank drafts in the safe," he explained. "The combination is written in the small ledger in my desk drawer." Clara nodded, taking mental notes. "Don't worry. Everything will be fine while you're gone." "I know it will," he said with a small smile. "You're more capable than most men I know, Clara Matthews." After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The evening air had a crisp edge to it, hinting at the approaching winter. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Yates said, his voice soft. "Yes," Clara agreed. "I never saw sunsets like this in Boston." "One of the reasons I could never live in a city again," Yates admitted. "I need open spaces, room to breathe." Clara understood. Since coming to Montana, she too had grown to love the vastness of the landscape, the sense of freedom it provided. "I'll miss this while I'm on the trail," Yates continued. "And I'll miss." He trailed off, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You'll miss?" she prompted gently. "You," he said simply. "I'll miss you, Clara." Before she could respond, he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over his land. "I should turn in. Dawn comes early, and we have a long ride ahead of us." Clara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at the abrupt end to their conversation. "Of course. Good night, Yates." "Good night, Clara." The house felt strangely empty after Yates and his men departed with the herd at first light. Clara threw herself into her work, cleaning areas of the house that had been neglected, organizing Yates's business papers, and keeping detailed records of the ranch operations in his absence. A week into the cattle drive, a fierce autumn storm blew in from the north. Rain lashed at the windows for 2 days straight, and Clara worried about Yates and his men exposed to the elements on the trail. On the 3rd day, as the storm finally cleared, Clara heard horses approaching. Hurrying to the window, She saw Jenkins riding up with 2 other hands. Her heart leapt, thinking Yates might be with them, but then she realized they were alone. "Miss Matthews," Jenkins called as she opened the door. "Got a problem with the herd.
Storm scattered in.
Boss sent me back for supplies and more hands. He and the others are trying to round up the strays." "What do you need?" Clara asked, already moving to gather provisions. "Food, mostly. Blankets, too." And the boss asked for the ledger with the cattle brands from his desk. "Need to sort out our stock from the neighbors." Clara quickly assembled the requested items, adding extra coffee and medical supplies in case anyone had been injured. "How is Yates?" she asked as she helped load the supplies onto a pack horse. Jenkins gave her a knowing look. "Tired."
Wet.
"But he's fine, miss. He's a tough one, our boss." After Jenkins and the others departed, Clara found herself restless with worry. That night, she stood on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clearing sky, sending up a silent prayer for Yates's safe return. 10 days later, just as Clara was beginning to fear something had gone terribly wrong, she heard the distant sound of cattle lowing. Rushing to the porch, she saw dust rising from the east as the herd approached. The cattle were guided into the home pasture by weary cowboys, and finally, Clara spotted Yates riding at the rear. His clothes were muddy, his face was covered in trail dust, and he looked exhausted, but the sight of him made her heart soar. She hurried down the steps as he dismounted stiffly, handing his reins to one of the hands. "Yates," she called. "You're back." He turned at the sound of her voice, and despite his obvious exhaustion, his face lit up. "Clara." Before she could think better of it, she threw her arms around him in a spontaneous embrace. After a startled moment, his arms encircled her, holding her close. "You're safe," she murmured against his chest. "I promised I'd come back, didn't I?" he said, his voice rough with fatigue but warm with affection. Realizing the impropriety of their embrace, Clara stepped back, her cheeks flushing. "You must be hungry. I have stew simmering and fresh bread." "That sounds like heaven," Yates admitted. "Let me get cleaned up first." Later, after he had bathed and changed, they sat at the kitchen table while Yates ate ravenously and recounted the events of the drive. "The storm hit us hard," he explained between bites. "Lost about 20 head over a ravine, and the rest scattered to the 4 winds. Took us 3 days just to gather them again." "Jenkins told me," Clara said. "I was worried." Yates's eyes softened. "Were you now?" "Of course," she replied. "The ranch needs you." "Just the ranch?" he asked, his gaze holding hers. Clara felt heat rise to her face. I missed you as well," she admitted quietly. Yates reached across the table and took her hand in his. "I thought about you every day, Clara. Coming home to you. It gave me something to push toward through the worst of it." His words sent a tremor through her. "Home to me?" she repeated. "Yes," he said, his voice low and serious. "I know you came here for a job, not what I'm starting to feel for you. But I can't help it, Clara. These past months, watching you build a life here, seeing your strength and grace despite everything you've been through." He squeezed her hand gently. "You've become more than an employee to me." Clara's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you saying, Yates?" He stood and moved around the table to kneel beside her chair. "I'm saying that I care for you, Clara Matthews.
Deeply.
I'm saying that I look at you and see the most beautiful woman I've ever known, not despite your scar, but with it, because it's part of what made you who you are." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "Yates, you don't have to say anything now," he assured her. "I know this might be sudden. I needed you to know how I feel." Clara reached out tentatively to touch his weathered face. "It's not sudden," she whispered. "At least, not for me." Yates's eyes widened. "Clara, are you saying—" "I'm saying that I care for you too," she said, finding courage in his openness. "More than I thought possible." With exquisite gentleness, Yates took her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. His eyes never wavered from hers as he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a tender kiss that made her heart sing. When they finally broke apart, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he murmured. "Never thought I'd find anyone who would understand the parts of me the war left broken." "We understand each other," Clara said softly. "Maybe that's why this feels so right." The following weeks brought a subtle shift in their relationship. Though Clara continued her duties as housekeeper and bookkeeper, there was a new intimacy between them, shared glances across the dinner table, hands brushing as they passed each other, lingering conversations by the fire in the evenings. As October gave way to November, the first snow dusted the mountains surrounding the valley. The ranch prepared for winter, storing hay for the cattle and stacking firewood along the side of the house. One crisp Sunday afternoon, Yates suggested they ride out to see the west pasture. "It's beautiful with the first snow," he told her. "And I've been meaning to show you the whole property." Clara, who had become a competent if cautious rider under Yates's tutelage, readily agreed. They rode side by side, their breath forming clouds in the cool air as Yates pointed out various landmarks and boundaries of the Double Y. They stopped at the crest of a hill overlooking a meadow bordered by pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. In the distance, mountains rose majestically against the clear blue sky. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Yates said as they dismounted. "I found it the day I first rode out here looking for land to buy. Knew right then this was where I wanted to build my life." Clara took in the breathtaking view. "I can see why. It's perfect." Yates took her gloved hand in his. "Almost perfect," he corrected. "It's been missing something important." "What's that?"
Clara asked.
"Someone to share it with," he said simply. "Someone who sees its beauty the way I do." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious yet tender. "Clara, when you came here, I offered you a job because I wanted to help you. I never imagined how much you would end up helping me bringing order to my home and business, yes, but more than that, bringing light back into my life in a way I hadn't experienced since before the war." Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes as Yates continued. "I know we've only known each other a few months, but I feel like I've known you all my life. Like my soul recognizes yours." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I'm not asking as your employer. I'm asking as a man who has fallen completely in love with you. Clara Matthews, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the sunlight. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Yates, I want to be clear," he said earnestly. "This isn't about propriety or convenience. It's about love pure and simple. I love you, Clara. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. Everything about you." Tears spilled onto Clara's cheeks as joy welled up inside her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Yates. I love you too." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger over her glove. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, the snow-covered landscape forgotten as they embraced. That evening, sitting close together before the fire, they made plans for their future. "We should wait until spring for the wedding," Yates suggested. "The pastor only comes through once a month in winter, and I want to give you a proper ceremony with flowers and sunshine." "Spring would be lovely," Clara agreed, leaning her head against a shoulder. "It feels right to start our married life with a new season." "And the house," Yates continued. "I've been thinking of adding on for a while now. A proper dining room, maybe another bedroom or two." He glanced at her with a soft smile. "For the future." Clara blushed, understanding his meaning. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "A family." Yates squeezed her hand. "We'll build something beautiful together, Clara. I promise you that." News of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. Most reactions were positive. Yates was well respected, and those who had met Clara had been impressed by her quiet competence and kind manner. But not everyone was supportive. During a trip into Willow Creek for supplies in early December, Clara encountered Harold Bentley outside his store. "Miss Matthews," he said, his tone formal. "I heard about your engagement, Young." "Yes," Clara replied, lifting her chin slightly. "We're to be married in the spring." Harold's eyes flicked to her scar, then away.
I'm surprised.
Young could have his pick of women in the territory. Many without your disadvantage. Before Clara could respond, Yates appeared at her side, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. "Bentley," he acknowledged coldly. "I see you're still judging books by their covers rather than their contents." Harold stiffened. "I merely meant—" "I know exactly what you meant," Yates interrupted. "And I'll thank you to keep such thoughts to yourself. I consider myself the luckiest man in Montana to have won Clara's heart." With that, he guided Clara away, leaving Harold standing speechless on the boardwalk. "You didn't have to defend me," Clara said as they walked toward their wagon. "I know you can fight your own battles," Yates assured her. "But I'll always stand beside you anyway. That's what partners do." As winter settled over the valley, the ranch took on a peaceful rhythm. The cattle required less attention, sheltered in the protected pastures closest to the barn, and the shorter days meant more time spent indoors. Yates and Clara used these quieter months to deepen their relationship, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Clara often reading aloud from one of her books while Yates whittled or repaired tack. One night in January, as a blizzard howled outside, Clara finished a chapter of Wuthering Heights and closed the book. "Heathcliff reminds me of the war," Yates said thoughtfully. "The way it consumed him, twisted his love into something dark." Clara set the book aside. "Did you fear that happening to you? After what you experienced?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Yes," he finally admitted. "There were times after I came west when I thought I might never feel anything but anger and pain again. The memories. They haunt you." Clara moved to sit beside him on the sofa, taking his hand in hers. "Will you tell me about the war?" Yates had rarely spoken of his experiences as a Union soldier, but tonight, with the storm raging outside and Clara's warm presence beside him, he found himself wanting to share that part of himself with her. "I was 20 when I enlisted," he began. "Young and idealistic, thought I was going to be a hero." A bitter smile crossed his face. "That notion didn't survive my first battle." As the hours passed, he told her of the horror of Antietam, the frozen misery of winter camp, the friends he'd lost at Gettysburg. Clara listened without judgment, occasionally squeezing his hand when his voice grew tight with emotion. "The worst wasn't the fighting," he confessed. "It was watching good men die for inches of mud, knowing it would all be lost again the next day. It was the senselessness of it all." When he finally fell silent, Clara reached up to touch his face. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "For trusting me with this part of you." Yates turned his head to kiss her palm. "You're the only person I've ever told, the only one who might understand." "Because of my own scars?" she asked. "Because of who you are," he corrected. "Strong enough to bear it, but gentle enough to help heal it." Clara leaned forward and kissed him, pouring all her love and understanding into the gesture. When they parted, she said, "We'll carry each other's burdens. That's what love is." As winter slowly released its grip on the land, preparations for the wedding began in earnest. Clara ordered fabric from the mercantile in Willow Creek to make her wedding dress a pale blue silk that Yates insisted on paying for despite her protests. "It's not every day a man gets to see his bride in silk," he argued with a grin. Mrs. Hawkins helped with the sewing, her experienced hands guiding Clara through the more complex aspects of the garment. "You've been good for him," the older woman commented one afternoon as they worked. Never seen the boss so happy as he's been since you came. Clara smiled, touched by the observation. He's been good for me, too. Makes a fine pair, you two, Mrs. Hawkins nodded approvingly. Both strong in your own ways, both kind under that strength. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new green grass in the pastures. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May, when the circuit preacher would be in Willow Creek. The night before the ceremony, Clara sat at her dressing table, brushing her hair. Tomorrow would be her last night in this room after the wedding. She would move into Yates's larger bedroom at the end of the hall. A knock at the door drew her attention. "Clara?" Yates called softly. "May I come in?" She quickly pulled on her robe over her nightgown. "Yes, come in." Yates entered, carrying a small wooden box. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her with her hair down the first time he had seen it that way. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Clara instinctively reached to cover the left side of her head where the hair grew thin from the burn scars, but Yates gently caught her hand. "Don't hide from me," he murmured. "Not ever." He set the box on the dressing table. "I have something for you. A wedding gift." Clara opened it to find a delicate silver hair comb inlaid with small pearls. "Yates, it's exquisite. It was my mother's," he explained. "I want you to wear it tomorrow if you'd like." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes. "I would be honored." Yates leaned down to kiss her gently. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow you become Mrs. Young." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Clara dressed with Mrs. Hawkins's help, the blue silk dress fitting beautifully. She arranged her hair in a style that incorporated Yates's mother's comb, cleverly designed to complement rather than hide the uneven growth on her left side. The ceremony was small but meaningful, held in the little church in Willow Creek. Most of the ranch hands attended, along with a few townspeople who had come to accept Clara despite her initial rejection by Harold Bentley. When Clara walked down the aisle, she had eyes only for Yates, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit. The love in his expression as he watched her approach made her feel truly beautiful for the first time since the fire. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, but Clara barely heard the familiar words, lost in the intensity of Yates's gaze as he took her hands in his. When it came time for their vows, Yates spoke clearly and from the heart. "Clara, when you stepped off that stagecoach, marked by life's cruelties but unbroken by them, I saw something in your eyes that called to my own wounded soul. You came west looking for acceptance, and I pray you found that with me. I promise to cherish you every day of our lives, to see you always as I see you now, the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. I take you as my wife, my partner, my heart's companion until death parts us." Clara's voice trembled slightly as she responded. "Yates, you looked at me when others turned away. You saw value in me when I had been deemed worthless. You taught me that scars, whether visible or hidden, are not our defining features, but merely part of the story that makes us who we are. I promise to stand beside you through all of life's seasons, to share your joys and ease your burdens. I take you as my husband, my strength, my home from this day forward. By the power vested in me," the preacher concluded after they exchanged rings, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Yates pulled Clara gently into his arms and kissed her with such tenderness that tears sprang to her eyes. The small congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued at the Double Y, where tables had been set up in the yard and a feast prepared. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting golden light across the land, Yates pulled Clara aside. "Happy, Mrs. Young?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. He led her away from the festivities to the edge of the property, where they could see the sun setting behind the mountains. "I have one more surprise for you," he said, pointing to a cluster of pine trees where the foundation of a new building was taking shape. "What's that?" Clara asked. A schoolhouse, Yates explained. For our children someday, and for the children of our hands and neighbors. I thought you might like to teach. You mentioned once that you dreamed of being a teacher before the fire. Clara stared at him in wonder. You remembered that? I only mentioned it once months ago. I remember everything you tell me, he said simply. Your dreams matter to me, Clara. She wrapped her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. I love you, Yates Young. And I love you, Clara Young, he replied, sealing the declaration with a kiss as the sun sank below the horizon, promising countless tomorrows filled with love that saw beyond scars to the beauty within. 5 years passed, bringing changes to the Double Y Ranch. The cattle operation had expanded, as had the main house. Yates had added the dining room and extra bedrooms he'd promised, along with a larger kitchen that Clara appreciated more with each passing year. The schoolhouse was completed and thriving, with Clara teaching a dozen children 3 days a week. Her reputation as a fair but firm teacher had spread throughout the region, and families would ride for miles to give their children the benefit of her instruction. But the greatest joy in Clara and Yates's life was their family. 3-year-old Joseph toddled after his father whenever possible, already showing signs of becoming a true rancher. 1-year-old Emma was the image of her mother, with the same gentle spirit but none of the physical scars. On a warm June evening, Clara sat on the porch watching Yates play with the children in the yard. Joseph squealed with delight as his father swung him high in the air, while Emma clapped her tiny hands from her blanket on the grass. Clara's hand rested on her rounded belly, where their 3rd child was growing. The doctor in Miles City had suggested twins this time, given the size of her at just 6 months along. As the sun began to set, Yates gathered up both children and joined Clara on the porch, settling Emma on his lap while Joseph climbed onto his mother's. Careful with Mama, Yates reminded him gently. Remember, we have to be gentle with the babies. Joseph nodded solemnly, patting Clara's stomach with exaggerated care. When will the babies come out to play, Mama? Clara smiled, smoothing his dark hair. Not for a few more months, sweetheart. They need to grow stronger first. Yates reached over to take her hand, the same tenderness in his eyes that had been there when he first proposed on the snow-covered hillside. You feeling all right? He asked. Not too tired? I'm fine, she assured him. Happy. And she was. The life they had built together was richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined that day she stepped off the stagecoach, her hopes crushed by Harold Bentley's rejection. What are you thinking about? Yates asked, noticing her reflective expression. Just how differently things might have turned out, she admitted. If Bentley hadn't rejected me. If you hadn't come into his office that day. Yates squeezed her hand. I think we would have found each other anyway. Some things are meant to be. Even with my scar? She asked, touching the mark that still ran down her face, though the years had faded it somewhat. Especially with your scar, Yates said firmly. It led you to me, and I'll be grateful for that every day of my life. As twilight deepened into dusk, they sat together, a family created through unexpected circumstances and nurtured by a love that had seen beyond physical appearance to the beauty of the soul within. The Double Y Ranch had become exactly what Yates had once dreamed it could be, almost perfect. With Clara by his side, it was complete.